We're live.
You went outside, it's raining. We are live, and this is Senate Finance, for a short break, and, we have the, city manager from Montpelier with us, that we, will have the city manager from Barry here tomorrow. But a request has been made that we extend the date, I believe, they are for taxes that are abated due to the flood. Ends April 15th. And Bill, give you the floor, give us some background, and what date do you want it extended to?
Well, first of all, I want to start by saying thank you for doing this in the first place. The initial, really appreciate.
Just need you to introduce yourself for the record.
Yes, of course. Sorry. My name is Bill Fraser. I'm the city manager in Montpelier, speaking on behalf of the city council. And I think I'm just speaking for Montpelier today, not the league.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for doing this in the first place, putting this first extension in. Obviously cities like Montpelier, Barry, and others really got hit with the flood and are subject to a lot of tax abatements and would have been out of pocket for the education portion of tax abatements. I think the way it's been structured is really fair. That you can't abate ed taxes but not municipal taxes and beat the system that way. So it's I think you've done the right thing there. So that is wonderful. I really want to appreciate that, Senator Cummings. I know you jumped right on that, and your committee got right behind it. So I do want to call that out. Here's just the practical reality on the ground. April 15, I'm not sure what or how that date got set initially. There is no statutory deadline for people to apply for abatements. So the way it's set up right now is not only do abatements have to be in, but they have to be fully processed and approved by April 15th. So we've got 50 abatements that are pending right now. They're trying to get them all done by the 15th. Some of them just are coming in this week. The Board of Abatement is trying to keep up with this and still make all their decisions. But the fact is that the applicants aren't required to get applications in by December 15. We're taking abatements right now for the first and second quarters, so summer and fall. But there could be abatements for the third and fourth quarters, spring and January through June, that we haven't seen yet and won't see till after April 15. So we'd certainly like to see an extension of this, and again, we're only talking about flood related abatements. Anything else is as usual. And I think we have a system for flagging that. We certainly know the areas that were flooded. Like I said, we have about 50 flood abatements in. One of the other strange things about this, of course, is we don't know out of how many. We don't know what the universe is of potential applicants. Maybe all 50 are in, maybe it's 50 out of 100. We don't know. And to go back to the issue about the quarters. So for those of you familiar with Montpelier, you noticed the buildings on Main Street in this block between City Hall and East State Street, they were open relatively quickly. So they might have an abatement for, July, August, September, maybe into October. But they were back and running. But then you got Capitol Plaza, who hasn't opened yet. So they're going to have longer abatement periods. So it's not the same for everybody. And so anyway, we would ask, in a perfect world, I think till April 15 of next year, but certainly through to the end of June 30 at a minimum. We've talked to, I know we've done some work talking on your colleagues on the House, and we believe there's some support. I don't think they've settled on a date yet either, but definitely more time just again, these are handled by a volunteer board of abatement, citizens that have to meet, and they hear these abatement requests, and then they have to process them, and then they have to have a deliberation session and issue a decision. So, here we are on April 3rd. We have 12 days to get this all done. And it's just going to be, we won't be able to. And so then cities like us and Barry will be on the hook for the ed tax for these flood related. So that's our plea. I'm happy to answer whatever questions I can. I'm not, I'm not the city clerk. I don't process the abatements, but that's where we're at.
Okay, getting those passed here. All right, so you could just keep processing. I'm not anticipating this is gonna have any more problems than the original. I assume Connor's heading up whatever's going on in the house, so I'll check with him.
Yeah.
And see if you can't get this out. My intention is to put it on miscellaneous tax, which is the last bill to go. I'm trying to think that may well get vetoed, so I'll see if I can find someplace else that might be safer to put it on. Or we could perhaps put it in the budget, because that has to go when the whole state shuts down.
Right.
We'll
Well,
find a
thank you.
way to get through.
We appreciate that. I think the only question that we would have, and certainly would defer to all of you about the best mechanism to do this, is simply, there will be, I guess, some period of uncertainty after April 15 and before it gets attached to some
Yeah.
bills. So, what if your advice is just keep processing them?
Well, you're gonna have to do that anyway.
We have to do it anyway, right? Exactly. But
Let's keep on. Senator McDonald, did you have a question?
I was trying to, what's being abated here?
When the town abates taxes on any property, Act 60 says they can abate the town, but they have to pay the full end fund to the state. If they're just doing that this just says they don't have to pay the ed fund for the house that's significantly damaged.
So.
Yeah.
On the 1st of April.
Yeah.
4 days ago. Have these properties been appraised at the same value they were appraised at last year?
so Senator, I can respond to that.
Yeah.
So this isn't a property value appeal. This is an ability to pay taxes. So, a classic tax abatement is somebody has a fire. And so their home or their building is destroyed by fire. So suddenly they're like, look, I was supposed to pay my taxes, but as of April 1, it was worth X, but now it's not. So can you abate my taxes until I rebuild after the fire? And so this is actually abating a tax bill. And so what we have is, we had a process, we did have a reappraisal, we did have values of people, but those were all established through the reappraisal process and the Board of Civil Authority process. We've done all that. This is simply people whose properties were damaged and are, either they can't live in their houses or they're commercial properties that were not able to bring in income. And so their value is temporarily, they're asking for tax abatement during this period of time while they're damaged, while they are rebuilding. And it's a pretty standard process. It's just that when you have a mass event like this with so many properties, and then the city would have to, I think for us, we were looking at over $1 million coming out of city funds to have to pay the ed funds for these abatements for these properties. So
I understand,
You wanna know?
Madam Chair, when your property is appraised on April 1st.
Yes,
And it gets washed away on April 2nd
yes,
or January or
Yeah. go on.
July 2nd. The people that live there don't have the money to pay their taxes based on the appraised value, which is no longer
No,
effective. So that's what we did last year and what we did during Hurricane Irene down in Wilmington. But this spring, the houses are not worth what they were last April 1st. Have they not been reappraised to reflect their current value 4 days ago?
Did the value change?
So they would have had the opportunity to ask for change in value. What would probably happen? So I think, Senator, what would happen would be they would get an abatement for this year. That's what this is about. And then next year, their value would be adjusted as of April 1st. That is kind of how the process works.
If they had built another wing on their house for 4 days ago, they would have been appraised for a higher value than last year.
Yeah, it should be adjusted down.
Why have they not, those houses not been adjusted for value, reflecting the damage of the floods?
That is the abatement process.
That's an appraisal process.
The lister should have done that. And I checked with him, but your house is appraised and its value on March.
I'd,
1.
I'd defer to people that are more knowledgeable. I'm not sure that's exactly how the process works. I think the appraisal is set as of April 1st. If you have a reason why you can't pay during that year, you can ask for an abatement and then get your value adjusted the next year.
Yeah.
But I will double check on that for sure.
The value should be adjusted for this coming year.
Correct.
First, but this is an abatement for last year's taxes when their house was substantially damaged. Okay. So Jill, can you?
Sure. Jill Remick, the Director of Property.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Didn't know
Okay.
Jill was there. We got the expert. Perfect.
When you talk about processing these, that's me. We got our first one in today. We have a couple people on our team who are helping me. I'm Jill Remick, Director of Property Evaluation for the Tax Department. So the way that Act 82, which passed in February, articulates this is that the abatement, as Mr. Fraser said, has to happen by April 15. And then we have a very tight window to get that to the Agency of Education for their cash flow statement that goes out in May. So the way that this is happening is the education tax liability from the municipality is abated. The municipality is responsible for abating the municipal in proportion. The ones we've seen so far, it's been a full abatement of both, but we've just barely released the application. So there is an application out now, as of yesterday, that we've sent out to towns to get these going. So tax department has no concerns with what's being proposed. It's a matter of making sure that the Agency of Education are aware this is being considered. That would actually go out to the towns as an adjustment for their September Ed Fund liability.
Okay.
Right, so that would be, it would be a few months away before that money adjustment was made, but otherwise, we're happy to process them whenever.
Okay.
So if FY 24 versus FY 25 is fine, and the agency and the towns are okay with the offset happening for their FY 25 Ed Fund payments.
So if we did this August 15th, who would we let know that? And
Yes, them, us, and we could send out, we could update our materials and our application and
Okay.
resend that out. We also work with VALA, VLCT, and Vermont Municipal Clerks and Treasurers Association to try to get the word out.
Okay.
I think folks are aware this conversation is happening. So we're happy to do that. For us, it doesn't take us any more time we've already built the application, so we would just adjust that.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'm sorry, I forgot one last thing that Agency of Education wanted me to check. If it does get extended.
Yeah.
Would, one thing to consider is if the ones that have happened before April 15 that we got, do we want those to go out in the May payment? And then the ones later go in September, or do we just want to do them all in September?
I
That may
have
be
no
something worth-
idea. What difference does it make?
A little more work if you do both,
Okay. So if we hold them all until
just
the end?
extend the whole window for everyone and then they
Okay.
can submit to us and.
All right. Then you're,
If a new house had been built and people had moved into it before the 1st of April of this year, it would be appraised at its appraised value. Would it not?
Yeah, there's been a lot of impact because of the flooding on this April 1 valuation, because there's also places that got destroyed.
If-
This is about the tax of a liability from last year, from 2023, but absolutely, there have been a lot of either new or destroyed things that are now on the grand list for April 1,
We're
2024.
talking about a new house that was put on, that they built after the flood, brand new house.
Right.
It gets appraised on the 1st of April at its value.
It's captured as of April 1 last week or 2 days ago, yes.
And
that's
any
right.
house that was around last year that got damaged, wiped out, or reduced in its
Mhm.
appraised value, would it not be appraised at the value it was 4 days ago.
Right. So a lot
So
of,
doesn't that take care, why would you need to abate a tax that on a value that
We're
is
not,
much lower?
we're not abating this year's taxes.
Right.
This is for last year's. We're not, right now, they should be reduced in value because they either aren't there, or only half of them are there.
Yeah.
And that we're abating last year's taxes, it's just that I thought the Capitol Plaza had opened. I hear it has to be open for the
For the
eclipse. And we're gonna have a lot more homeless people sleeping in the parking lot. But how do they abate? They've been closed. I suppose they could ask to be abated for the whole year. Because they haven't been open or only partially open, or they could wait, maybe come in and ask for a year and a half.
May I try to help?
On April 1st.
Well, they should be, yes.
So
It
let
should
me
have,
help.
Yeah.
So let me try to clarify this.
Okay.
So on April 1st of 2023, a year ago, a house was appraised, let's just say at $200,000. They got a tax bill for $200,000 that they pay every quarter. In July, they got destroyed by the flood. So they've been getting a tax bill from last year. They're asking for an abatement for those taxes. This year on April 23rd, on 1st, so 2 days ago, when we look at them, we're going to say they're only worth $25,000 now. So their tax bill for next year, starting July 1, will be at a much lower value. But the abatement that we're talking about is for things from last April 1st who were taxed at full value pre-flood, who now can't pay their taxes. So I think that's the difference. We will be changing those values for the next tax year. I
Okay,
hope that helps.
So, if I understand it, an abatement is not a reappraisal.
correct.
Now, is an abatement function as a loan that this will have to be paid back Sunday, or is it if the tax is forgiven?
It's a dismissal of
It's
that liability.
And the entire tax, or is it,
what,
Can be partial.
The municipality can
you can
decide,
decide?
as long as they, for the purposes of this reimbursement, it has to be in proportion.
having sat on a board of
But they could
abatement,
do 20%, they could do 100%.
yeah, it is your local people.
And it's basically cutting someone a break.
Right.
Well,
That's-
injustice.
Yeah.
Why, yeah. How can you pay on a house that is only half there?
We don't just do it through flooding. I mean, when a house burns down or if somebody passes away or other extenuating circumstances, it serves on those same boards. It's just a way to accommodate those types of conditions.
Okay, the committee will see if we can tie up the details. And we'll see about sticking this on miscellaneous tax or someplace safer, but I don't know what's safe this year. So we will be there.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Jill.
We're coming
Thank
back today.
Lisa?
Lisa,
It's right there.
okay, so we have an addition. I didn't realize until afterwards that Lisa Wright had a longer presentation. So I told her she could come back and give us this. Bill, I think we're done with this, okay. So Lisa, okay. The floor is yours, Lisa.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. There was some confusion where now I'm presenting at the originally scheduled time, more or less. And I know it's late in your day, so I will try to keep it as simple and cut to the chase with our points from Vala regarding the utility valuation portion of this bill. So I'd like to literally cut to the should I introduce myself first? Lisa Wright. I'm the president of the Vermont Assessors and Listers Association. I am also chair of the board of listers in West Rutland and contract assessor for Proctor, Pollitt, Pittsford, Chittenden, and Shrewsbury. We are very overworked in listers offices these days. So our recommendation to this bill for amendment and changes is to make the state's values as amended to be advisory value opinions, similar to the way the state of New York does this. We feel that these values should not be mandatory, but continue to be advisory only. And I'm going to go back to the details if you want them, but I want to kind of digress from my presentation to just let's get back to basics of why we are doing this in the first place. So our current system is one of advisory values from PV&R regarding utility values. And the towns, according to the statute now, have to consider those values along with other relevant information and determine the value. So the ultimate decision still lists with the town board of listers or assessor as the case may be with the town. We don't feel that that should change in any way. We feel like there are going to be many unintended consequences to this. So it looks like Jill has left, and that's unfortunate because I would like to ask her. So if she has left for the day, I would suggest that you
Sure.
ask Jill, how many towns currently are accepting the PVR inventories for utility valuations right now?
Okay, I think what
Do
we've
we-
heard is that they have hired their own appraiser. So there will be new valuation.
Right. No, what I'm trying to get at is what is the problem that this solution is for? Is this a solution looking for a problem, or is there really a problem to be solved? So this is the way it has been presented to VALA by PV&R, that they are revamping the utility valuation methodology, but that their intent was for this to be voluntary, but that they thought the values would be significantly improved and better defensible and better defended by the state so that the towns would opt to choose them. So if that's the case, if say my estimate would be somewhere between 80 and 90% of all towns in the state just simply take the state's inventory values. Most towns do not hire an independent appraiser. That is the minority of towns because of the expense, because of the complication of it. So if the majority of towns are already accepting those values are going to be improved with this new, with Brian Fogg's appraisals. Why do we need to make those values mandatory? What problem are we fixing? And I don't think we are fixing any problem. We are creating untold additional problems that you on this committee may not even foresee right now, but us people out here in the field are anticipating those problems. And you're telling us right now. So as a couple of weeks ago, we were told these were going to be optional, not mandatory. Now, all of a sudden, they're going to be mandatory. So there's a lack of transparency here and a lack of consulting people out in the field who could help you with the unintended consequences and negative implications of this.
What are the unintended consequences, the problems that you are anticipating?
The problems I'm anticipating are first of all, you have a conflict of interest brewing in a sense where PVR is undertaking responsibility for valuations. They are also the body that judges the equity and validity of our appraisal work. So is that not a conflict of interest? So this is one of the points that we have a consensus among our VALA legislative about, that we're very concerned about the amount of power being vested in PV&R, where they are also supposed to be, in a sense, an arbiter and a judge of our assessment practices, and now they're engaging in being a body that gives values to the towns. That's problematic. And because now one entity is invested and responsible for those values, it's going to be a whole lot easier for the utilities to come in and grieve those. It's not going to make that harder for them to appeal those values. It's going to make it easier. Just I urge you to do your research and look at how this is panned out in other states.
Okay, if
So
the state takes-
again, our recommendation,
Can I get a word
sorry,
in?
but
And get a question. If the state is taking over and doing the evaluations, for one thing, the evaluations will be the same across towns. They will not have 52 different forms to file, 52 different sets of evaluations. So it'll be easier for the utilities, who are a statewide entity. Why the state will defend those values, so the town is off the hook. You aren't gonna have to defend them. You aren't gonna have to pay a special appraiser to do that. And your utilities are getting a much simpler system to keep their records and keep their taxes all straight. So I'm not sure, we thought this was going to help the towns.
well, my opinion is you've been somewhat misled. And I am very concerned about the conflict of interest. I'm concerned about the lack of transparency, not consulting stakeholders in this process. So we have to date heard nothing about the new valuation model. In the director's progress report, annual progress report, it was stated that Mr. Fogg has already held roundtable discussions with the utilities. So I would question how independent and objective these appraisals are going to be when you have one person, one body doing it. I don't think that the utilities are having to submit umpteen forms to different towns. When in my towns of West Rutland and Proctor that have hired an independent appraiser, they start with the utility model. There's a similar methodology that they use, so it's not an entirely different methodology. I don't know where that information is coming from. I would like again you to ask PVR of that. I would like to hear of what towns are reinventing this wheel completely on their own, and I don't believe there are any listers that are doing that. I have not heard of it.
Okay,
Could I just,
I
I may have meant this from before, but what is the conflict of interest that the state has?
So the conflict of interest is that traditionally PV&R has not been determining values. They're not a valuation department. That's not their job. Their job has been to advise us on assessment best practices. And over the years, they've done a tremendous job with that. Over the last year, since Act 68 of 2023, what we've accomplished is tremendous distrust and discord between listers and assessors and PV&R, because PV&R is being instructed by legislation like this to be heavy-handed in these valuations. And I just don't believe it's a good thing for Vermont. We try very hard as listers and assessors to be professional and to refer out when we don't know enough. And we do use advice from PV&R, and we're happy to accept that if it's voluntary. Again, how many towns right now, I would hazard a guess that it's upwards of 80%, are already using the PVR methodology to value utilities. It's the minority that are going out. And I'll tell you, the minority that are going out are the more complex ones that are not going to be resolved by this. But the language in the legislation concerns me that that's next, because it states the division may require that each municipality use certain valuations furnished under this section. And then it specifically says transmission and distribution. So are we not opening the door for the next step to be a state mandated system for hydroelectric and significant substation properties? Those are too complex to do on a simple methodology.
Yes, they are, and we have set up a fund so to help the towns pay for those because they are very expensive. Don't think you'd like to have to do that. I don't know that you have any in West Rutland. But the towns that have to appraise those dams find them a very heavy value and might like having been taken off there. I don't know. Okay.
We haven't received any assistance from the state. I can tell you that I am the assessor for the town of Proctor, and it does have a 10 megawatt hydroelectric facility, which the reported value was 9 million and change from the utility. When we hired an independent appraiser, the appraised value was 15.296 million. Pretty
No,
significant difference.
No one is going to be taking the utilities valuations. These will be independent valuations. They will not be taking the utilities valuations. Okay, we have hired an independent assessor whose specialty is utilities. So you shouldn't have to hire one unless you think the state hires incompetent appraisers, which is your prerogative. Okay, I'm gonna have to wrap this up for today. Did you get to finish your presentation?
And yeah, in a somewhat scattered way, and I apologize. I realize it's late in the day. I will submit what I assembled in writing if that's at all helpful, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, yeah, that would be helpful, Zane. We'll post that on our website so that everyone can see it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we have committees, we have an anxious room waiting. We need to have a discussion about reimbursement parity for office telemedicine and audio only telephone. I need to get some direction. What does everyone think? Where is somebody from? Oh. Bill, you were here. Okay, I thought you were. No, I just. It sounds like we may have some fence building to do. Okay. So. Yeah, I need a call. What is everybody thinking? Let's start with decided up. We're gonna use the McDonald method, up, down, or I don't know.
On what specific?
This is whether or
Because the bill
not,
has to be.
well, first of all, we have to extend the sunset or do away with the sunset on telemedicine. Because that's coming up, I think, in January, but if we're doing it, we might as well do it, not have to do it again next year. We have to do that, and then the decision is during COVID, everybody was paid full rate. Telemedicine, up until then, I don't believe telemedicine had really been used very much and wasn't paid. So we paid in person, which there wasn't much of during COVID, telemedicine and telephone. Telephone, for mental health is proposed to be paid full pay even over the phone, because the nature of mental health is it's a talk thing and it works just as well on the phone. So it's all the other talks. I was told the other day that a speech therapist called can go up to $800. This is a phone call. So we can say, I'm not hearing anyone say we're doing anything with telemedicine. So we can say that the phone only gets paid at full rate. Phone only gets paid at the 75%, or we could say 85, or we could say 50. I mean, but 75 is where DFR, when they were sent to analyze this and have set that rate from, I believe this is the third year, at 75. Or we could say that they don't get paid, or we could say they get paid but not set a rate, say, but not to go below So which would allow some, because not all phone calls are email.
Is there one more option, which is what I thought I understood, that we could just continue to let DFR set this rate, which understands this issue and did the great research, so they might set it at 75, they might set it lower or higher?
I think DFR might like to be rid of that. They've done the analysis.
So they wanna give it to us to do.
That's right.
Right back.
They have set it at 75% for 3 years based on their analysis, and they gave us half an hour presentation on their analysis.
I don't remember that testimony that they wanted this off their plate, but fair enough. That's your-
Well, they haven't said that, but that's really not what they do, is set insurance rates. It's very, I don't know that we have ever set insurance rates. It's very unusual.
I mean, I don't think I'm qualified to do that. I have graduated from medical school in the last 2 or 3 years. And so I'm not in a good position to evaluate that. I hear what DFR says, and I don't know how many doctors are on their staff, but I do trust their ability to analyze insurance rates on one hand. On the other hand, what we've heard from the medical community is in many cases that the services they provided are equivalent and they have the same value and they take the same amount of time. And that just becomes, a judgment call on our part. We've heard from some insurance companies that they don't think they should pay more. It will cost presumably, I just have no idea how much because we don't have a lot of evidence of whether or not it will have any material or semi-material effect on healthcare costs. I don't get the sense that at this point that it will, from what I've heard, but again, just heard a very limited amount, and I think we're probably going to be fairly arbitrary in terms of what we decide, if we decide anything at all.
I think the providers would all like us to pay them in full.
Mhm.
I think the insurance companies are a little concerned that we're setting their rates and it will possibly have some impact on health insurance, which
Well, again, that is, regardless of whether we were talking about anything, that would be the same result. Provider, whatever service or commodity or whatever would say we ought to be paid more, and the insurance company that paid for it said we ought to be paid less.
Right.
So I'm still not any more informed than I was before.
okay. I think for most of the witnesses, the one that they really want to protect is telemedicine. I think we can do that. We've heard that they really don't have codes specialized. I could see maybe speech therapy would work over the phone.
And what
But
they've also said is things like diagnosis for hernia, they wouldn't do over the phone because they can't effectively do it.
right, so you trust that the doctors will refer you in and they get paid for I think it's called the triage, but just saying you really need to come in for that. Or I can,
Well, maybe one of the kind of positions we could take is we could say that we will go for the full rate, which the providers are asking for, but provide some kind of an evaluation to be done by someone who we designate to test whether or not it is working as intended, whether the value that's being provided is as claimed, let's say, whether it be a year out or 24 months out, and go back and look at it, have somebody look at it. That somebody might be DFR, it might be someone else. I don't know how they go about doing that.
we had DFR do it, they came with 75, so. Come on, committee.
I didn't know if you wanted us to all.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is committee
Okay.
discussion.
So I mean, I will say, I went back and forth a lot on this one, and it's because I think parity is different than equity, I mean, I think saying. You don't have transportation, you don't have good internet, so the best we can come up with is for you to call in. Doesn't necessarily deliver the full healthcare that the person needs in all these situations. But I sat here for a long time with some of the advocates to talk about some pieces that I hadn't visualized as much anymore in the coding process. They're looking at lots of different codes for what they do. They're really trying to bring the person in if they can't make a sound judgment over the phone. Obviously, it would be expensive for us to have everyone visited who can't make it in, but that would probably be equity. But if they can't have someone go in, they are using the same code and there is a place where they have to write in audio only, you know, they're not using a different code, and I do think that isn't acknowledging that they are trying to code for the exact same service, and I don't think that little checkbox needs to be there that says this was performed audio only if the doctor makes the determination that they delivered the best care under that code as they possibly could while accommodating the patient. And then it was pointed out to me that somewhere in the underlying bill, it says if an insurance company could figure out a system to pay providers appropriately and and with some parity, even if it's not the exact same price, that they are sort of welcome to iterate on this as well.
It's not trap.
Yeah, the value-based contract. So, you know, that feels like a way for insurance companies that are frustrated with this call for parity to still dig in a little bit more about issues of people not being able to make their appointments in person. So I'm ready to support with them.
Okay, so I've got 100%, Senator,
I think it's,
Corn, and that's.
I think it's, my understanding is that part of the, what, did you make a club?
I just. I
So you go to the ninth one.
Oh,
Isn't that what you told me?
yeah. I think part of the definition of profession is that it's somewhat self-regulated. You know, the medical profession, now the one that is we allow a conflict of interest to anytime anyone regulates themselves, but they have the expertise that the rest of us don't have. So, and the medical profession regulates itself all the time on all sorts of things, you know, deciding what is a proper procedure and what is an improper procedure and what's ethical. So my sense is that we probably, and Randy got into this also, so we don't have the qualifications to decide what is appropriate, and what isn't. I think that should
Then we
be done.
can decline, we can kill the bill. Or take it, I mean,
And well, you know, whether or not it gets paid, the fact is, I mean, I know we all, my doctor argues with insurance companies all the time. I mean, it's a complaint here. I got into medicine to cure people, and now I spend all my time running a business that's at war with other businesses.
but they're all businesses.
Yeah. So my sense is that the question of, probably there are times when the phone call really is the equivalent of an office visit. It's every bit, other times not, and probably there are times when it's 75% is good.
Okay, I've got 2 at 100%. I'm going down this line.
Is that where you are?
No, I didn't say, I said we should leave it up to the medical profession.
That's what I heard.
Okay, so, but the medical profession as represented in here by all the advocates says 100%.
They want us to do that.
Yes.
Well, and that was sort of my going down the rabbit hole of if it felt like, well, these are two different codes, right? There's a code for like, you're having a talking visit that doesn't require someone pick up on your physical cues or your body language, which is the majority of how we communicate. Are you getting the same care? But doctors still could attest that this is the appropriate code for the service I provided, but then they have to also write audio. They also have to check box that says audio only, and I think that does second guess, you know, the appropriate coding of the medical professional. That they are choosing the code that best meets the situation regardless if it was provided audio or not, and they're going to bring a person in if they need to.
I thought I heard the point that you were saying, Senator McCormick, which was that if we mandate the parity, then we are taking away their self-regulation ability.
Yeah.
I too have been going back and forth on this, and I would say where I landed was leaving it with the DFR, only because I trust them a lot more than us to determine this as things go on with more information. And then the last thing I'll say is, and I don't want to steal your thunder, your Red Sox comment earlier today is also what persuaded me to think DFR needs to continue to decide this. No pressure on.
I don't
making
even
your
want
Red
to
Sox
have
comment.
this. Should we then have DFR come over and tell us if they are willing and able to continue to do this?
That's what I support, but
Sort of,
I
don't,
wanted to know who's asked us to alter the current practice?
Pardon?
Who's asked
the,
us to alter
the
the current
medical
practice?
professions as represented by their organizations in this room.
And I don't know, maybe because I was questioning the bill, I got a lot of emails from providers about when they
I
do.
think we've all gotten emails.
Well, I'm not interested in altering the current practice unless someone comes in and makes a big presentation that takes me by storms.
Madam Chair, can I just,
Yes.
Jen Carvey, Legislative Council, just to remind you, the status quo expires at the end of 2024, so that's part of why you're having this conversation. Is if you do nothing, you are making a decision to not continue with.
I would
with
expect
current
the
act.
sunset, Madam Chair.
We have a sunset on.
You have two sunsets, you have, a-
175.
right, you have a sunset on the audio only 75 or more, at the end of 2024, and you have a sunset on the telemedicine 100% parity at the end of 2025.
And I don't think there's any disagreement on either extending that or taking away altogether. The one is DFR has been setting the rate. They have done the research, they've done 75. The providers would like to get full pay. So
I think we
we'll have
discussed.
DFR over and ask. No, yes. Okay,
You're what, Mark? Yeah, I'm over. Ask
DFR,
them what they.
You're proposing that we have DFR back and ask for, is that it?
or ask if they are willing or able to keep setting this rate. Is that-
Well, I think I'm fine with that. Take another period of testimony. I think we've got some additional testimony from, at least in writing, comments that we've received from folks in the medical profession since we last met. I saw one letter that was rather compelling. But one of the things in bringing DFR back, assuming that that's something that we want to do, I'd almost like to assess how confident that they are that 75% for things other than mental health is in fact the right decision. And I'd like to just understand a little bit better how they arrived at that decision in terms of reaching that conclusion. I don't fully understand what they've done to arrive at the conclusion.
So we will ask them, A, to come back and help us understand how they reached that decision. And if they would be willing to continue to do that. I think they're gonna tell us it's not something they do and they're not comfortable with it, but we'll ask.
So that's partly why I fell back on letting them continue to do this, because I just feel if we set it as parity, then it's stuck, and then we're setting this rate. But if we leave it with them, then maybe they don't have a great deal of confidence they can adjust and they can do so.
Well, that's the thing though, that worries me is that the people that we have doing it, just make the recommendation, don't feel confident in doing it because they're not experts in doing it. And that's why I said, if we made a decision to go to whether it be 100% parity or whatever it is right now, but set up a process that within a year or so, somebody, and that somebody is yet to be defined, who is competent to do this, can look at it and say, does this make sense?
Well,
I just did.
the other thing we could do is do nothing. We could pass the sunsets. We could take out the sunset or
Leave everything
for
alone.
parity, leave everything alone and let the insurance companies, because not all phone calls are the same. I can see where a speech therapist might work over the phone more than I've got a herd in my side.
But the testimony again that we heard from medical professionals is if there's a hernia that requires an examination, we don't do a telephone.
That's right.
And we don't bill,
Right,
we don't do a duplicate billing in that case where in-person evaluation is required. And a telephone won't work and we don't bill twice.
right.
Well, not, I just, so there's a cost to the insurance ratepayer question. And there's a healthcare policy question. I think this bill came to us because the healthcare policy question would say there are people who will simply not have access to a doctor if their doctor's not willing to accept audio only. Because they're not being paid at the same rate, so they are closed off to more
Yeah,
options.
that goes once, and usually you have a, but at some point, you're gonna have to come down and see the doctor if you've got anything. I mean, even if you've got a sore throat, they're gonna eventually have to look at it.
Well,
and decide
we- I mean, we're not the healthcare committee, so we've also heard of situations where you're doing substance use treatment and you do one in-person visit, you do
Yeah.
one remote visit, one in-person visit, one remote visit. There are doctors who are willing to work with both the reimbursement rate and the meeting their patients halfway to provide the best service possible to people who work, have kids, don't have transportation, can't come in. That would be us making a healthcare policy decision. I think instead of questioning, is this going to have a material impact on the rates that we can't live with?
That
Beyond
is our
that, though,
decision.
an example, I think one letter that I got, yesterday or today from a doctor who says that she is one of 3 neonatal care physicians in Vermont. I don't know, the rest of you probably got that letter. And the argument was, I can't be in 3 places at once, but if I'm doing something around the state, but if I'm doing something that involves neonatal care, where I have given an instrument of some kind to a mother, I think that was in the letter, and so there is some mechanical testing that may be done at home to test, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm able to evaluate that, I'm able to do that kind of a visit alternatively with an in-person visit for the patient. Therefore, the patient doesn't have to come in for that purpose. But I'm basically reimbursed at a lower rate for doing what essentially is the same thing.
I think that's
Now,
probably.
that's a health, but that is as much a healthcare policy
Yeah.
question as
Yes.
it is a question regarding our ability simply to set rates.
Right. And, technology is changing, it's changing the world.
I just don't wanna make a poor healthcare policy decision. If we don't really worry that the rates are going to increase dramatically. And we've heard they won't. And I mean, neonatal visits in person feel like hazing, it's not, unless you have a partner and the best car seat and, you feel good getting out of the house, like you're doing it also for the well-being of someone making the best healthcare decisions for themselves as well.
Are we gonna be
And if you're
able to
gonna have to
tell
accept less money for it.
from what we hear from DFR about this potential of rate impact?
Right.
And we'll talk to them about that. I do know years ago, home health has some system where you hook yourself up and they do your blood pressure and a lot of things. I mean, it's not that hard to do, and they can read you and know if they have to get out of the mud season, send you from the clump.
There are procedures and pharmaceuticals that at a certain time are, quote, alternative medicine.
No,
And then later, become medicine because they've been scientifically validated. Okay, now, who does that validation? That's the profession, right? That's the.
well, if it's a pharmaceutical, it's the Food and Drug Administration.
It is.
Yeah. You don't validate our own drugs in the state.
I mean, that's, the thing is that someone makes a knowledgeable, science-based judgment
Yes.
that this is okay. And I say it can be something that at some point some people thought it was okay and some people didn't.
Well, we've been through that with Lyme disease and a few other things.
Well, I mean, most old men take softball medicine. That's actually, that's science, that's not, health magazine stuff, that's actual,
All right.
It works. Okay.
So committee, we're on the insurance cost side. Can we make a decision on that?
If you mean extending the sunset for telemedicine, I fully support that.
Oh, yeah.
That I think is a given, and that's what doctors really use. I don't know if you've got instruments that you're hooking up over the phone, how that goes. All right. You're not going to make a decision, we will ask DFR to come back. Okay, say, see if we get DFR in. Okay, next time we'll put this on first thing on the agenda. Or last, and we won't go home till we make a decision.
You give it the Bunsen burner behind each of us.
Could someone remind me, is the current bill for telemedicine, just extends the sunset or does away with this?
Removes the sunset.
Okay,
Sunset.
I'm in favor of that,
Yeah,
certainly. I think telemedicine has proven its place in a rural state.
that is definitely, yeah, I'm just taking that as a given, no one else had anything to say about it. Okay, time to go home, it looks like we're getting rain. We were. So far, the storm has not lived up to its hype.